there's nothing permanent to land use in county politics. There's no permanence to zoning. There's no permanence to land use in coastal California. It is at the whim of the changing wind of politics. The politics of the day is that these big homes that, if they're built on the foothills, could lead to future subdivisions and rezoning and more dynamic development within the foothills area and within the coastal valleys of Gaviota. And that's the history of Southern California. There are some major landowners that own 10, 13, 17,000 17,000 acres of land. What's their future? It's predicated on their family. These 40, 50 member families that are operating that ranch. It's not just one person. They hardly can agree on what the future of that ranch is. And when the matriarch dies, they have a pretty serious tax burden. So, I mean, we have to empathize with the small family farmer and the rancher of the Gaviota because they're facing a system that works against them. You know, how do we create a more sustainable agricultural approach to Gaviota, I think, is as important as protecting the coastal bluffs, in my view. And what I'd like to see is a stronger coalition between those who live on the land and farm it and ranch it and those who care about it and want to protect it. Because we have a lot more in common than we think we do. There's over 300 watershed groups in California. Why? Why this proliferation of watershed-based activity in the state? Mostly non-governmental, with no funding from the state or federal governments. This, like Urban Creeks Council or the Friends of the LA River, Friends of the Bayona, all these different groups emerge. And the proliferation of groups like that in the last 10 or 20 years in particular is a really fascinating thing. I think the Naples Coalition is a reflection of a new movement, a new way of building coalitions and sharing resources and sharing information, sharing technology to confront maybe a common foe. And the common foe might be ourselves, but it also might be somebody who wants to profit and purely profit. I think the future for Santa Barbara is watershed groups, watershed-based planning. It'll be institutionalized at the county within 10 years, I think. There'll be resources for it. And this is a hopeful way of seeing the future. We will have homes on the Gaviota, but we may have salmon 30 years from now. Because we might have to. We might have to. It's not the act of restoration really of a plant, but the community that is sort of organizing in different ways and sharing resources in different ways and not depending on government to solve the problem. Here's the dilemma, and that is you can use through public access and parks, and you can use a place to death. That certainly is the case. Yellowstone and other national parks are good examples of places that are at an overcapacity, overused. And one value, therefore, that we need to learn about is the notion of a resource. And a resource is something that is a source of nature redirected for human beings. And perhaps some places are left as something more than a resource, that there's a wilderness in part of the landscape that is more than a resource to use. We are all obligated as members of a community to participate and to promote that sense of community, which is extended to the more than human world, animals, plants, and insects, a circle of animals and plants and insects that we're part of. We don't always act out of our self-interest or greed or profit motive or some corporate mentality, but we also can act out the service of a broader sensibility, not out of our selfishness, but out of a broader sense, a larger sense of self. And that's an ethical element. That's a question of worldview. A lot of my work has been on ecological restoration through the National Science Foundation. I had about 12 years of support to study what is the meaning of restoration. Restoration is first and foremost a cultural community building activity where little kids are out planting red willows, not bureaucrats, where children are learning about seeds. And in the learning about seeds, they're learning perhaps the subtle differences between native and non-native. They might be also learning about the way a creek meanders, and the value of a free-flowing creek. One of the things that I try to do as an educator is shock an audience out of being an audience. And one of the things that I think we have to deal with here on Naples and Gaviota is we have to shock the public out of being a mere passive observer in a world that they have a stake in.